or face consequences.
Israel cabinet approves the opening of new humanitarian routes into Gaza to allow more aid into the territory.
United States CIA Director Bill Burns is expected to travel to Cairo this weekend to meet with his Egyptian and Israeli counterparts and the Qatari Prime Minister to try and reach a breakthrough in the talks on releasing hostages in Gaza held by Hamas.
Prime Minister Modi sets an ambitious target of roughly doubling the economy and exports this decade, according to a government document seen by news agency Reuters.
India's homegrown digital payments platform UPI, it's crossed the 100 billion transactions mark in 2023 to 24, is now the undisputed king of digital transactions in India.
Pakistan plans to deport 67,000 Afghan migrants after Eid al-Fitr. Reports say the Interior Minister of Sindh province has ordered Pakistan's police to implement the second round of the plan to return Afghan migrants.
Indian-American Akshay Bhatia takes a 3-shot lead in the opening round of the PGA Tour's Texas Open, but the highlight of the day was 3-time major winner Jordan Spieth acing the 199-yard 16th hole. All right, we're beginning with the phone call between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Joe Biden, where President Joe Biden asked for an immediate ceasefire.
Now, according to the White House, Biden made clear that there is a need for Israel to implement concrete steps to address civilian harm and the safety of humanitarian workers. Now, this demand has been amplified by the recent deaths of 7 World Central Kitchen workers. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken briefed about Biden and Netanyahu's roughly 30-minute call. Listen to this.
President Biden spoke a short while ago with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The leaders discussed the situation in Gaza. The president emphasized that the strikes on humanitarian workers and the overall humanitarian situation are unacceptable. He made clear the need for Israel to announce a series of specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers.
Now, the White House did not specify what could change about U.S. policy, but it could include altering military sales to Israel and America's diplomatic backup on the world stage. Prime Minister Netanyahu, on the other hand, has warned of enormous implications for U.S. security if Israel isn't victorious.
This is a larger battle. Our battle is your battle. Our victory is your victory. And if we don't have a victory, this will have enormous implications for American security, for our common future. So we must win. So I have 3 messages for you. The first is we're going to win. Absolutely. Victory is within reach. It's very close. And there is no substitute for victory.
Now, this comes as Prime Minister Netanyahu's office said that his security cabinet has approved a series of immediate steps to increase the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, including the reopening of Erez crossing between Israel and northern Gaza for the first time since the October 7th Hamas attacks. Now, Netanyahu's office said that it would allow its Ashdod port to be used to process aid shipments bound for Gaza and allow increased Jordanian aid shipments through Kerem Shalom land crossing.
The Israeli military said that a probe into the strikes on a World Central Kitchen convoy that killed 7 aid workers earlier this week will be made public soon.
Major General Yoav Harivan presented today to the Chief of Staff of the investigation. It is now presented to the Defense Minister and the Prime Minister, and I believe after it will be presented to the ambassadors of the relevant countries and the representatives of the WCK, we will make it public in clear and transparent manner, and it will happen soon.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces continue to operate in the area of the Israel-Gaza border as the Israeli military said that it had beefed up forces and heightened the readiness of its troops.
A thick cloud of grey smoke was seen rising from the skyline behind a tent camp in Rafah, the southern Gaza city. This is near the Egyptian border where many Gazans are displaced.
Now, according to the health ministry in Gaza, during the past 24 hours itself, the Israeli army killed 59 Palestinians and wounded 83 others, bringing the total death toll to nearly 33,000 and injuries to nearly 75,500. Now, the Palestine Red Crescent Society said that 15 of their team members have been killed since the war in Gaza started 6 months ago.
The Palestine Red Crescent staff and volunteers are working tirelessly to alleviate this unprecedented suffering. Yet, this is not without sacrifice. 15 members of our teams were killed since the beginning of the war.
All right, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has also sent us this report. Let's listen to this.
President Biden's shift in tone towards Israel's conduct in the war against Hamas signifies a growing frustration with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and a desire to influence Israel's action through U.S. policy. This shift could ultimately impact U.S.-Israeli relationship, potentially leading to a more conditional approach to U.S. support for Israel, as well as increased pressure on Israel to address the humanitarian concerns in Gaza. Also, President Biden's most trusted advisor, his wife, Jill Biden, is urging for an end to civilian casualties in Gaza. In a meeting with a group of Muslims at the White House earlier this week, the president said that the First Lady has been urging him to, quote, stop it now. This, according to the New York Times, quoting an attendee at that meeting who heard his remarks.
All right, for more on this, we're now being joined by Professor James A. Russell, Associate Professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS, where he teaches U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, military innovation and national security strategy. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I want to begin by asking you, as I mentioned earlier, the United States, it's asked Israel for an immediate ceasefire. Now, we could say that this is the closest that the United States has come to giving Israel an ultimatum. What I want to understand is, what do you reckon has triggered such a shift in response from the United States? Now they are saying that there may be policy changes.
Well, many of us observers who have been watching this unfolding humanitarian and strategic catastrophe over the last several months have been wanting the White House to start exercising decisive American leadership to bring this conflict to a close and to use the circumstances created by the conflict to create some kind of lasting political settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. President Biden has shown no willingness to do this. I'm heartened to hear that his wife has finally chimed in. Maybe President Biden will listen to his wife if he's not listening to those of us in the country that are objecting to this. It remains to be seen whether this change of tone will result in a change of actual real policy. I would describe the American policy in this war in Gaza as one of style over substance. President Biden has done nothing in the last 5 months to try to bring egregious Israeli behavior to heel. Professor, and I would say, forgive me for interrupting. Go ahead.
I just want to, also just take it a little further from here. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. over 32,000 Palestinians have died in the last nearly 6 months. As soon as there are reports of an Australian citizen dying, a Polish citizen dying, a British citizen dying, dual citizenship, civilian dying, and now there are immediate calls for a ceasefire. Does the US value the lives of its allied nations' civilians more than the lives of Palestinians?
I don't know what to tell you. It's simply it's morally reprehensible behavior. I don't know how else to describe this. And it makes me ashamed to be an American citizen watching our leadership behave in this manner. The Palestinians have been slaughtered wholesale over the last 5 months with American bombs, American munitions. And I might add that as these latest calls are coming on the United States, again from his wife, to stop the killing, President Biden is pressing the Senate to proceed with another $15 billion sale of advanced combat aircraft to the Israelis. I mean, it's just I don't know how to explain it. It's morally reprehensible, and I might add, right. So I've been an observer of foreign policy and American presidents over the course of my 30-plus careers in the Department of Defense. And, of course, presidents tend to do this. Public officials tend to do this. But in this particular case, it's just really, I've used this term morally reprehensible. But President Biden has been leaking stories to the press for the last month and a half about how upset he is about this and how, he's opposed to what President Netanyahu is doing.
Yeah, but the weapons transfers, they continue.
But he refuses to take a public stand and take meaningful action to do anything about it. And to me, this raises this whole question, right, of all countries with their leaders face this, which is that, so what are the actual real convictions of the person in charge, right? If they're leaking stories about how they're opposing, but they're afraid to take a public stand against it. I mean, that's what the job is. If you're gonna, if you're elected.
Yes. Yeah, I also just wanted to get your thoughts on this now. What's the weight that you find behind Biden's words? As you've already mentioned in great detail regarding what you feel about, how he has been leaking these stories to the press. But I also wanted to understand, how will this impact their policy change? What kind of policy change can they even bring about, given the fact that the weapons transfers still continue? And also, do you feel Israel is going to abide by it?
This is a good question, of course. And it's a two-part answer. The first answer is that the United States could stop the transfer of weapons paid for by the American taxpayers to the government Israel. It's up to the executive branch, it's up to Biden to send these arms sale notifications to Congress. The Congress reviews these cases, and if they don't do anything about the proposed sales, the sales can proceed. The executive branch doesn't have to present these sales cases to the Congress. It doesn't have to do this. But instead, of course, the Biden administration has done the opposite. At the height of this crisis, we are proposing to provide another billions of dollars of advanced combat airplanes, right, to the Israelis. The Biden administration doesn't have to do this. They're choosing to do this. So that's the first part of the answer to this question, which is related, of course, to the second part of the answer, was that the Biden administration has refused to condition any of this assistance to the Israelis on Israeli behavior, which I might add is based in U.S. law. For anyone who knows anything about the arms transfer process in the United States, the recipients of this equipment are supposed to use this equipment in accordance with the restrictions that are spelled out in something called the Foreign Assistance Act, right? Which places what the Israelis are doing. This is all illegal. It's illegal. And the Biden administration has just, again, it's turned a blind eye. He's leaking stories to the press His wife is complaining about it. What has he actually done? The answer is nothing.
All right, that was Professor Russell joining us and sharing all your insights on this. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
All right, let's shift our focus. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Moscow, it cannot be the target of Islamic fundamentalists. The statement comes after the Islamic State claimed responsibility for the March 22nd attack that claimed lives of 144 people.
Now, the Russian president called the country a unique example of interfaith, interreligious and inter-ethnic harmony. He also said that the attacks were aimed at tempering the country's unity.
We have every reason to believe that the main goal of those who ordered the bloody, awful terrorist attack in Moscow was precisely to damage our unity.
Adding that he could not see any reason behind the brutal mass shooting, President Putin has been reiterating the attacks were ordered by Ukraine. However, Russia has not produced any evidence to back the assertion against Kyiv. Meanwhile, Ukraine has repeatedly denied any involvement in the attacks.
The US has backed Ukraine over its non-engagement in the attack. According to reports, Washington had in fact warned Russia of an Islamic State attack at the Crocus City Hall on the 7th of March, which was 15 days prior to the actual attack. Now, the intelligence report specified the correct venue. However, the timing was not precise. Now, Iran also reportedly tipped off Moscow over a possible Islamic State massacre backed by intelligence reports. Now, Tehran shared the information that was obtained from interrogations of those arrested over deadly bombings in Iran on the 3rd of January earlier this year. The twin bombings in the city of Kerman claimed the lives of at least 100 people in Iran. However, the signal did not specify the target or the date.
Russia's Federal Security Service, it's arrested at least 8 suspects. This includes 4 suspected gunmen who opened fire at the Crocus City Hall. The attack was one of the deadliest on Russian soil.
Taiwanese rescuers are looking for 18 people still missing after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck the island's mountainous and scenic east coast a day after Taiwan was rocked by its most intense earthquake in 25 years.
Now, the country had lashed out at China for comments that yet again indicate how the Asian superpower claims Taiwan as its own. The island nation condemned China and called it shameless after Beijing's deputy ambassador to the United Nations thanked the world leaders regarding their concern in the aftermath of a massive earthquake in Taiwan.
Taiwan's foreign ministry expressed its anger on Thursday, saying, and I'm going to quote here, the ministry solemnly condemns China's shameless use of the Taiwan earthquake to conduct cognitive operations internationally. Now, in response to an outpouring of support, Taiwan's government has already thanked governments and leaders world over for their messages of concern and offers of support. However, China's formal note of thanks once again rakes up the issue of the country claiming democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory and also the right to speak for it on the international stage.
At least 10 people have been killed and over 1,000 reportedly injured after a massive 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck eastern Taiwan on Wednesday. Search and rescue efforts are still underway. All right, moving on. An alliance opposed to Myanmar's military junta has reportedly targeted 2 military installations with a drone attack in the capital city of Naypyidaw.
However, the military has said that it thwarted and seized more than a dozen drones in the attack. Now, according to news agencies in Myanmar, a total of 13 drones were shot down in a foiled attack. No casualties or damage to property have been reported. Myanmar's National Unity Government and the Anti-Military People's Defence Force have claimed responsibility for the attack. A spokesperson from NUG has said that the attack was a success as it targeted one of the most heavily guarded locations in the country. And this comes as drones have become a crucial fighting weapon for the anti-military forces to fight back.
Myanmar has been in political turmoil since the military seized power from the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February 2021. This triggered nationwide protests that were suppressed by the security forces. This has also forced the military to fight small resistance groups on multiple fronts across the country. According to a UN report, the civil conflict has displaced over 2 million people, while almost 60,000 people have fled to neighboring countries. All right, moving on. In Syria, it's not the war that's directly impacting the Ramadan celebrations. Instead, it's the pinching economic crisis that's keeping people from truly enjoying themselves.
Well, of course, this is the holy month, and in Syria, it looks very different. Markets in Syria seem empty this season, and the only shops that attract a crowd are the ones offering discounts.
This is Tawfiq Moshave, an electrical engineer by profession. Moshave makes his way through the busy Damascus markets. He is in search of essential items and cheaper options in preparation for the daily iftar meals.
Life has become very expensive. We're cutting down on many things and we try to get less quantities. We've reached the point where we buy some of the vegetables and fruit by the piece, not by the kilo. It's gotten to that extent. There are some things I got today that I can't get every time, to be honest. Some things I get once a week or even once every 2 weeks.
Markets in Syria are seemingly empty this Ramadan. High cost of living and economic hardship have dampened the holiday spirit. At home, Moshave's mother Tawfiq is seen preparing the evening meal for her family hours before breaking the morning fast. She said that it was customary to cook for the others as well as one's own family. But the cost of living today and the hike in food prices has restricted this tradition. The once vibrant tradition of sikba, where neighbors exchange meals, has been impacted by the economic crisis. People are still sharing, but in rather small portions.
Before, we used to cook and feed other people and neighbors. Now, we feed our children only. Because everything has become more expensive than before. It was cheaper before, now it is expensive.
When we see what is happening, the increase in prices, the wars, the killing, all of this is misery. So in the old days, when a person used to be comfortable and happy, even with just the simple things, they were better off than they are in these difficult days that we are going through.
Syria has been devastated by long years of instability since protests against President Bashar al-Assad erupted in 2011. Bloody conflict, Western sanctions and government losing control of oil-rich land has triggered an economic meltdown.
All right, and with that, we call it time for a short break now.
On the other side of World DNA, when we come back, in a few weeks' time, India will host its general elections. And the latest, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made an ambitious target of roughly doubling the economy and exports by this decade. We'll get you the complete report.
Also on the other side, India's homegrown digital payments platform, the Unified Payments Interface or UPI, continues its growth momentum. It's now the platform registered record number of transactions and volume in the previous financial year, which ended on the 31st of March. All details on the other side. Do stay tuned.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
This week on the West Asia Post, pressure is mounting on Israel from all sides. From allies to voters, the support is waning for Netanyahu's war strategy. More Israelis say they want him out now. We also discussed the spike in Israel-Iran tensions after an IDF strike on an Iranian diplomatic office in Syria. Also on the show, Gulf countries cautiously invest money in crisis-ridden Iraq. Will Baghdad bounce back? All this and much more. Catch the West Asia Post only on WION. World is one.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time.
I actually pushed myself right out of the damn tournament.
We go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, so far on the show, we've covered what's happening in West Asia. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now been given an ultimatum by the US President Joe Biden for an immediate ceasefire. They've also said that if that does not happen and that if Netanyahu does remain defiant, there may be serious policy changes as well. What will those be? Those, of course, remain to be seen.
Now, that was in the previous half hour of World DNA. In the next half hour, we are going to be bringing you several reports. One of them will really put the light on how UPI, India's homegrown digital payments app, has flourished in the previous financial year, which has just ended March 31st. All that and a lot more right here on World DNA. Let's get you started with the headlines at this hour.
Biden tells Netanyahu that the overall humanitarian situation in Gaza is unacceptable and warns Israel to take steps to address the crisis or face consequences.
Israeli cabinet approves the opening of new humanitarian routes into Gaza to allow more aid into the territory.
US CIA Director Bill Burns is expected to travel to Cairo this weekend to meet with his Egyptian and Israeli counterparts and the Qatari Prime Minister to reach a breakthrough in the talks on releasing hostages held by Gaza by Hamas.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi sets an ambitious target of roughly doubling the economy and exports this decade, according to a government document.
India's homegrown digital payments platform UPI, it's crossed the $100 billion transactions mark in 2023 to 24. It is now the undisputed king of digital transactions in India.
Pakistan plans to deport 67,000 Afghan migrants after Eid. Reports say the Interior Minister of Sindh province has ordered Pakistan's police to implement the second round of the plan to return Afghan migrants.
All right, in a few weeks' time, India will host its general elections. Political leaders are trying to woo the voters.
Well, in the latest, according to a report, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made an ambitious target of roughly doubling the Indian economy and exports by this decade. The Indian Prime Minister has highlighted the economic growth as one of his biggest achievements in election rallies. The report suggests he has guaranteed to make the Indian economy the third largest in the world if he wins a third term in a row.
Now, based on International Monetary Fund data, India is currently in the fifth slot with an economy size of over $4.1 trillion. The United States is on the top with around $27 trillion, followed by China, Germany and Japan.
Now, as per the document seen by Reuters, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asked officials to finalize a plan by May. He plans to expand the Indian economy to $6.69 trillion by 2030. When Modi took office for a second term 5 years ago in 2019, he had promised to make India a $5 trillion economy by the current fiscal year. But partly due to COVID-19 related disruptions, meeting that target is now virtually impossible. If the Prime Minister secures a third term in the upcoming elections, he aims to raise per capita income to $4,418 from around $2,500 in the next 6 years. Pakistan continues its crackdown on Afghan refugees. Reports suggest Islamabad is yet again planning to deport some 67,000 Afghan migrants.
And this will happen reportedly after Eid al-Fitr. According to reports, the Interior Minister of Sindh province has ordered Pakistan's police to implement the second round of the plan, and that's to deport, of course, thousands of refugees back to Afghanistan.
After the recent decision of Pakistan, international organizations have once again asked Pakistan to stop the repatriation of Afghan refugees. They say the lives of the repatriated refugees, especially women and girls, are at risk. Although, according to Islamabad, the decision to deport Afghan nationals comes as they believe they had been behind the attacks, smuggling and other crimes in Pakistani territory.
Moreover, a day after senior Taliban leader urged Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and Islamabad to sit together and negotiate for peace, Pakistan has rejected the proposal. They've urged Kabul to take action against terrorist groups operating from its soil.
Now, this comes as TTP have carried out some of the deadliest attacks in Pakistan since 2007. Now, these attacks have surged post-November 2022 after a truce brokered by the Taliban between Islamabad and TTP broke down.
All right, on to news now from the world of technology. We're talking about illegal fishing, which is a pertinent issue across the globe. It threatens the marine ecosystems and puts food security and regional stability at risk as well.
Now, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, every year illegal fishing leads to a loss of around $23 billion.
Now, according to a report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, Southeast Asia has 4 of the top 5 illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing industries in the world. China fares the worst. Russia is the non-Southeast Asian country and it ranks at number 4. So the question is, how can we deal with the practice of illegal fishing? Enter technology. Artificial intelligence and technology is now being used to prevent illegal fishing. Global Fishing Watch is one such company that is using AI to battle this growing concern. The company was co-founded by Google, marine conservation body Oceana and environmental group SkyTruth. It's using AI and satellite imagery to track the movements of commercial fishing vessels. The AI tool analyzes vast amounts of satellite data to detect vessels and offshore infrastructure as well. And the AI program also makes use of radar sensors and optical imagery to identify vessels that do not broadcast their positions. The company aims to use this advanced AI software to map the movements of over 65,000 commercial fishing vessels worldwide. And the use of this technology, it becomes important as many fishing companies and individuals turn off the GPS-based automatic identification system of their vessels. And why is that? So that they can go undetected and even enter restricted water zones. Meanwhile, the University of Southampton is also doing its bit to fight the business of illegal fishing. They are building a submarine robot that uses underwater sensors and AI to identify the sound of fishing. It transmits the information to concerned authorities in real time. Currently, the submarine robot can differentiate between the natural sounds of the ocean. It is now being trained to identify the noise of fishing trawlers operating in protected waters. Artificial intelligence is helping various industries around the world, and now it is being used as a weapon to defend the seas from illegal fishing.
India's homegrown digital payments platform. We're talking about UPI, the Unified Payments Interface. It continues its growth momentum. The platform registered record number of transactions and volume in the previous financial year, which ended on the 31st of March. Let's break down the numbers for you. Starting off, total UPI transactions which reached 131 billion in 2023-24. Now, this was the first time that transactions crossed the 100 billion mark. Between April 2022 and March 2023, this figure stood at just 84 billion. Now, a whopping 57% increase in transaction volumes is what has been seen in the previous year. In terms of value, total transactions stood at over $2.4 trillion. Now, that's a 44% rise compared to 2022 and 2023, when this figure stood at over $1.6 trillion. Now, UPI's average ticket size, which is the average amount spent per transaction, fell 8% to $18.15. Now, this means that more people have been using UPI for smaller transactions, signifying the platform's ease of use for everybody. Moreover, UPI had a huge lead over other forms of digital payments like IMPS and credit cards. And that's a clear indication that UPI remains the king of digital transactions in India, and several nations all over the world are looking towards India to adapt to this UPI platform. Back to you, Haim, for more.
All right, well, let's shift our focus now. The currency market in India is bracing for a tectonic shift in a bid to arrest the volatility in the Indian rupee. The Reserve Bank of India announced curbs on currency derivatives trading. But what exactly is currency derivatives and how will this rule impact traders? More details in our next report.
The Indian rupee's recent instability made the Reserve Bank of India to take action by restricting currency derivatives trading. The deadline for the rule coming into force was set as April 5. However, the RBI has now delayed the rule's implementation to May 3 because of the extreme moves and volatility in the rupee. What does currency derivatives mean? Currency derivatives are contracts that deal with buying and selling currencies in the future. In simple terms, traders bet on a currency's value against the dollar on a future date. For example, currently $1 is equal to about 83 rupees. In the derivatives market, traders can bet that the rupee's value could fall below that level, let's say 80 rupees per dollar, or rise above that level to say 85 per dollar at a future point. So based on expectations of the rupee's value at a certain time, businesses tend to offset any potential losses by betting or hedging against currency moves. The RBI's rule now states that anyone taking a certain bet in either direction will need to be able to prove they have forex exposure. So how will this work? Traders will now have to show dollar earnings or dollar payouts in their businesses to bet in the derivatives market as a hedge play. Currency derivatives often bring huge fluctuations in any currency's value. But coming May 3rd, trading in currency derivatives can only be used for hedging against price fluctuations and not speculative trading anymore. Moreover, participants needing to show their underlying forex exposure before trading will prevent random trades. How will this rule impact? The rule is likely to impact a majority of traders, with one estimate putting the figure at 80%. With many unlikely to be able to furnish proof of underlying forex exposure, this could bring down trading volumes dramatically. Some experts argue the latest rule could prove to be a costly step in protecting the rupee from fluctuation. Instead, the new rule could end up making India's currency derivatives unattractive for foreign investors. Still, some experts say the extreme moves in the rupee from the RBI's decision will only be temporary. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
All right, next up, let's get you stories that are making headlines in the world of sports, beginning first with football. Chelsea stunned Manchester United 4-3 in the latest ever turnaround in the history of the English Premier League. Skipper Conor Gallagher put the horse ahead at Stamford Bridge